So here's the thing about living with your parents in your late 20s. It's supposed to be temporary, right? Just a quick pit stop while you get back on your feet. That's what I kept telling myself anyway. I'd been working at this warehouse outside Pittsburgh for 3 years. Nothing fancy, just moving boxes and driving forklifts. The pay was decent enough to cover my share of the bills and help out around the house. Then corporate decided to restructure, and suddenly I was restructured right out of a job. Moving back into my childhood bedroom felt like admitting defeat, but my folks seemed okay with it at first. Dad even said it made sense financially. So I packed up my apartment, said goodbye to my roommates, and drove the 40 minutes back to the little town where I grew up. For the first couple months, things were fine. I'd wake up early, help Dad fix the gutters or patch up the roof. Mom would make these huge Sunday dinners, and we'd all pretend like everything was normal. I was sending out resumes every day, doing odd jobs for neighbors, contributing what I could to groceries and utilities. But something shifted around month 3. Dad started getting this edge in his voice whenever we talked. Money became the main topic at dinner. He'd mention the property taxes going up, or how the water heater needed replacing, or how much it cost to fill up his truck. Every conversation felt like it had an invisible price tag attached to it. Mom got quieter. She'd give me these looks I couldn't quite read. Not angry exactly, but not warm either. Like I was some kind of burden she was too polite to complain about directly. The house started feeling smaller, the silence between us heavier. I tried staying out of their way. Spent most of my time in my room or at the public library applying for jobs. Found some promising leads in Cleveland, maybe Columbus. Anything to get out and start fresh somewhere new. Then one Tuesday afternoon in October, everything exploded. I came back from a job interview about an hour away. Hadn't gone great, but I was trying to stay optimistic. Walked into the house and immediately knew something was wrong. Dad was standing in the kitchen, face red, hands balled into fists. He started yelling before I even got my jacket off. Something about money missing from the garage. Said he'd been saving cash in an old metal toolbox out there, keeping it separate for when tax season rolled around. Apparently, he'd gone to add more to it that morning and found the whole thing empty. We're talking a few $1,000s, just gone. And he was looking right at me when he said it, not asking, accusing. Said I was the only one who'd been in the garage recently, that I must have taken it. I stood there completely frozen, trying to process what was happening. The accusation was so out of left field, I almost laughed, except his face told me this wasn't a joke. I tried explaining that I had no idea about any cash stash. Never saw a metal box. Never went through his stuff. But he wasn't hearing it. Mom came in from the living room, and I thought maybe she'd be the voice of reason. Instead, she just crossed her arms and said she didn't believe me either. Said I'd been acting suspicious lately, always on my phone, always leaving the house at odd hours. Which was insane because I was literally just job hunting and trying to stay out of their hair. But logic wasn't part of this conversation anymore. Dad said he was done supporting someone who'd steal from his own family. Mom said she couldn't trust me in her house anymore. The words felt unreal, like I was watching this happen to someone else. They gave me 2 hours to pack my stuff and get out. 2 hours. I remember standing in my childhood bedroom, looking at the glow-in-the-dark stars, still stuck to the ceiling from when I was 12, trying to figure out what just happened to my life. Everything I owned fit into 2 duffel bags and a suitcase I bought at Goodwill years ago. It was raining when I loaded everything into my beat-up Honda. Dad stood on the porch with his arms crossed, making sure I actually left. Mom was somewhere inside, wouldn't even come to the door. No goodbye, no last chance to defend myself. Nothing. Just out. I drove to a motel off the highway, the kind with hourly rates and a flickering vacancy sign. Paid cash for 3 nights, because that's all I could afford. Sat on the edge of a bed that smelled like cigarettes and cheap detergent, and tried to figure out my next move. The whole thing felt like a bad dream. One day you're family. The next you're an accused thief sleeping in a roach motel with everything you own within arm's reach, because you don't trust the lock on the door. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to find where I could have said something different, done something different. But the worst part? A week later, I ran into Tommy Benson at a gas station. He'd been my neighbor growing up, still lived 2 houses down from my parents. We got a talking, and he mentioned how everyone on the street felt bad about what was happening with my folks' house. Apparently, the bank had started foreclosure proceedings. They were months behind on the mortgage, maybe longer. The whole neighborhood knew about it, except me. Tommy assumed I had left because of financial stress, not because they'd kicked me out. He had no idea about the accusation, the missing money, any of it. That's when it clicked. There never was any cash in a toolbox. Or if there was, it got used to try saving the house. Either way, my father needed someone to blame, and I was convenient. Easier to make me the villain than admit he'd messed up so badly they were losing everything. I sat in my car outside that gas station for probably 20 minutes, just processing it all. The betrayal felt different now, deeper. They hadn't just kicked me out. They'd rewritten reality to make themselves feel better about it. Turned me into something I wasn't so they could sleep at night. And that's when I decided I was done trying to fix things with them. Done hoping they'd realize their mistake and apologize. Whatever happened next, I was moving forward without looking back. At least, that's what I told myself while eating vending machine chips and sleeping in a motel that charged by the week. I had about $800 to my name, no job, and no family. But I also had something I didn't have before. Clarity. I knew exactly who they were now. And more importantly, I knew who I needed to become. Someone who didn't need them. Someone who could make it on his own. Cleveland started looking better by the day. Fresh start, new city, no history weighing me down. I started making plans, real ones this time. And I promised myself one thing as I fell asleep that first week in that dingy motel room. Whatever I built next, I'd build it solid. No one would ever have the power to take it away from me again. Cleveland wasn't exactly a dream destination, but it had something Pittsburgh didn't anymore. No memories, no baggage, no parents who thought I was a thief. Just a city where nobody knew my name or my story. I found a room in a house with 3 other guys, all working construction or retail. $250 a month plus utilities. The place was a dump, but it was mine. Well, my corner of it anyway. I slept on an air mattress the first month and kept my clothes in trash bags because I couldn't afford a dresser. Job hunting in a new city with no connections is brutal. I must have filled out 60 applications that first week alone. Fast food, warehouses, call centers, didn't matter. I just needed something, anything, to stop the bleeding in my bank account. Finally caught a break at this small company called Midwest Property Solutions. They had a weird business model that I didn't fully understand at first. Basically, they bought up houses that banks had foreclosed on, fixed them up cheap, and either flipped them or rented them out. Not the most glamorous work, but they were hiring. Started as a general laborer, hauling trash out of abandoned houses, ripping up old carpet, that kind of thing. The houses were always in rough shape. People don't take care of places when they know they're losing them. Broken windows, holes in walls, sometimes worse. Found a dead raccoon in an attic once. That was a fun Tuesday. But here's what nobody tells you about rock bottom. Once you're there, the only way is up, and every small win feels massive. Got my first real paycheck, and nearly cried in the bank parking lot. Bought an actual bed frame at a thrift store, and felt like I'd won the lottery. These tiny victories kept me going. My boss, Rick, was this gruff older guy who looked like he'd been working construction since birth. Didn't talk much, but he noticed when you work hard. After about 3 months, he pulled me aside and asked if I knew anything about paperwork. Told him I was pretty good with documents and details. He started having me help with the administrative side. Foreclosure auctions, title searches, tax assessments, all that fun stuff. Turns out I had a knack for it. The legal language made sense to me. The numbers added up in my head. I could spot a good deal from the listing alone. Rick noticed. Started teaching me more about the business side of things. How banks bundle foreclosures. What makes a property worth buying. How much renovation is too much. He'd take me to county auctions and show me how to bid, when to walk away, how to read a room full of investors. 6 months in, I wasn't just hauling trash anymore. I was helping decide which properties we bought. Rick even gave me a small commission on deals I brought in. Nothing huge, but enough that I could finally breathe a little. Moved into my own studio apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was all mine. Bought a used Ford pickup truck from a guy on Craigslist. Paid $1,800 cash for it. Thing was old and loud, but it ran. Having my own vehicle changed everything. Suddenly, I wasn't dependent on bus schedules or bumming rides from roommates. I could go anywhere, do anything. Started saving money for the first time in my life. Not much, maybe $50 or $100 a paycheck, but added up, opened a separate savings account, and pretended it didn't exist. Just watched that number slowly climb. Life wasn't perfect, but it was stable. That's all I'd wanted. Some kind of foundation to build on. I worked hard, kept my head down, learned everything Rick would teach me. The guy became something like a mentor, though neither of us would have called it that. Then one evening, about 10 months after I'd moved to Cleveland, I was sitting at my desk going through the weekly auction listings. We always got them on Thursdays, and I'd spend Friday mornings flagging potential properties for Rick to look at. I was scrolling through addresses, half paying attention, when one jumped out at me. 42 Pine Street. I stopped breathing for a second. Checked the town listing. Same zip code. Same county. Same everything. My parents' house was going up for auction. I sat there staring at my computer screen, reading and rereading the details. Foreclosure sale scheduled for 3 weeks out. Starting bid at $32,000. Property description listed it as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath single-family home, approximately 1,800 square feet, built in 1987. I knew every inch of that house. The creaky third step on the stairs, the way the bathroom door stuck in humid weather, the spot in the backyard where Dad had tried to plant a vegetable garden that never quite took. My first instinct was to close the browser and pretend I hadn't seen it. Not my problem anymore, right? They'd made their choice when they threw me out. Why should I care if they lost a house? But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Pulled up the listing again that night, and the next morning, and the day after that. The address kept floating around in my head like some kind of ghost I couldn't shake. Rick noticed me spacing out during a site inspection. Asked if everything was okay. I almost told him, but something stopped me. This felt personal, private. Something I needed to figure out on my own. The auction was on a Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. I'd been to dozens of these by now, knew exactly how they worked. You show up, register, bid if you want. Simple, clean, businesslike. I had the money saved. Not a lot, but enough to make a serious bid if I wanted to. The question was whether I wanted to, whether I should, whether this was closure or just reopening old wounds that had barely started healing. I drove back to that town for the first time in almost a year. The whole drive felt surreal, like I was heading toward some alternate version of my life. Every exit sign, every familiar landmark brought back memories I'd worked hard to bury. Decided to scope out the house before the auction. Needed to see what I'd potentially be buying. That's what I told myself anyway. Really, I just needed to see it with my own eyes, confirm this was actually happening. Pulled up to 42 Pine Street around sunset on a Saturday. The place looked abandoned. Lawn was overgrown, weeds pushing through cracks in the driveway. One of the front windows had a board nailed over it. The mailbox hung at an angle, stuffed full of junk mail and flyers that nobody had bothered collecting. But lights were on inside. They were still living there, still in the house even though the bank owned it now. I sat in my truck across the street for probably 20 minutes, just watching. Saw Dad's silhouette pass by the kitchen window. He looked older somehow, more stooped. Part of me wanted to knock on the door right then. Ask them what happened, how it got this bad, why they threw me out instead of telling me the truth. But I didn't move. Just sat there until it got dark. Then drove to a motel on the edge of town. Spent the next few days doing research. Pulled property records, tax documents, mortgage history. The paper trail told the whole story. They'd refinanced the house twice in 5 years, pulling out equity both times. Missed their first payment about 8 months before they kicked me out. By the time I was sleeping in that motel, they were already 4 months behind. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings a week after I left. All those conversations about money, all that tension, it was never really about me. I was just the easiest target when everything started falling apart. The anger I'd been carrying around started shifting into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe understanding. They'd been desperate, scared, drowning in debt they couldn't talk about. Still didn't excuse what they did, but it explained it. Auction day came fast. I put on the one decent shirt I owned and drove to the county courthouse. The building hadn't changed since I was a kid. Same marble floors, same echo when you walked, same smell of old paper and floor polish. Registration desk was set up in the main hall. I filled out the paperwork using my Cleveland address. The clerk didn't recognize me. No reason she would. I was just another investor looking for a deal. About 30 people showed up for the auction. Mix of house flippers, landlords, and cash buyers. I recognized a few faces from other auctions I'd been to with Rick. They nodded, I nodded back. Just another Tuesday morning in the foreclosure business. The auctioneer worked through the list alphabetically. Each property got maybe 2 minutes of bidding before the hammer came down. Some went fast, others had no interest at all. I waited, heart pounding harder with each address called. Then I heard it. 42 Pine Street. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,800 square feet. Starting bid $32,000. The auctioneer rattled off the legal description while I tried to keep my hand steady. Nobody else bid. Not a single person raised their paddle. The property was too small for commercial investors, too run down for most house flippers. Wrong side of town for the landlords. Everyone had done their homework and passed. I raised my hand. $28,000, below starting bid. But that's how these things work sometimes. If nobody else wanted it, they'd take what they could get. The auctioneer looked around the room, waited the required time, then brought down the hammer. Sold for $28,000 to bidder number 43. That was me. I just bought my childhood home out from under my parents. The whole transaction took maybe 90 seconds. Signed some papers, arranged the closing date, walked out of that courthouse owning a piece of my past. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the pen. Sat in my truck in the parking lot for a while, trying to process what I'd done. This wasn't supposed to be emotional. It was just business, just another property. But my chest felt tight and my eyes were burning, and I had to remind myself to breathe. My phone rang that same afternoon. Unknown number with the old area code. Let it go to voicemail. Listened to the message 3 times before I could really hear what it said. It was Mom. Voice shaky, tried to sound calm. Said the bank had called them with news about the house. Said someone had bought it at auction. Asked if maybe we could meet up and talk. Just have a conversation like adults, like family. Like family. That phrase stuck in my head. We hadn't been family when they threw me out in the rain. Hadn't been family when they called me a thief. Hadn't been family for all those months. I was figuring out how to survive on my own. But maybe I could hear them out. Maybe I owed myself that much. If not them, needed to look them in the eye one more time. See if there was anything left worth salvaging. I called back and agreed to meet at the coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. Public place. Wednesday afternoon at 2. She sounded relieved, grateful even, thanked me for being willing to talk. I hung up and stared at the closing documents spread across my passenger seat. In 3 weeks, the house would legally be mine. And then what? Kick them out? Let them stay? Try to fix everything that was broken between us? Didn't have answers yet. But Wednesday was coming either way, and I needed to be ready for whatever conversation was waiting on the other side of it. Wednesday came faster than I wanted. I got to the coffee shop 15 minutes early, ordered something I didn't really want, and picked a table by the window where I could see them coming. They showed up right at 2. Dad's truck pulled into the lot. Same old Chevy he'd been driving since I was in high school. Watched them sit in the cab for a minute before getting out. Mom checked her hair in the mirror. Dad just stared straight ahead. They looked different. Older, obviously, but also smaller somehow. Dad's shoulders weren't as broad as I remembered. Mom's hair had more gray. They walked into that coffee shop like people heading to a funeral, slow and careful. Mom saw me first. Her face did this complicated thing I couldn't quite read. Relief maybe, or guilt, or just exhaustion. She walked over while Dad hung back at the counter, pretending to study the menu board. We sat down without hugging, without any of the usual greeting stuff families do. Just 3 people at a table. Try to figure out where to start. The silence stretched out uncomfortable and thick until Mom finally broke it. She told me they didn't know the buyer was me. Said the bank just called with a name and a closing date. She'd tried looking up online but couldn't find anything. Her voice cracked when she admitted they'd been hoping maybe it was an investor who'd let them work something out. I didn't say anything at first. Just let her words hang there while I stir my coffee. Dad finally came over and sat down, still wouldn't look directly at me. His hands were shaking slightly, fingers drumming against the table. Mom kept talking, filling the silence with explanations about how everything fell apart. The refinancing that seemed like a good idea at the time. The property taxes that doubled. Dad's hours getting cut at work. The transmission going out on the truck right when they were already behind on payments. It was all the usual stuff people say when they're losing their house. Bad luck, bad timing, bad decisions that snowballed. I'd heard versions of this story dozens of times at auctions and property inspections, but hearing it from them felt different, heavier. Then she got to the part about that night. The night they kicked me out. Said things were so tense back then, they weren't thinking clearly. Were scared and angry and needed someone to blame. Her eyes filled up when she said it. Tears she tried blinking away. I finally spoke up, asked her point blank if there ever was any money in a toolbox in the garage. The question seemed to catch her off guard. She looked at Dad, waiting for him to answer. Dad cleared his throat twice before the words came out. Said yeah, there had been money. About $3,000 he'd been hiding from the bills, from the bank, from Mom. Saving it up to pay off the land they owned upstate. The 10 acres his father had left him. Except when the mortgage fell behind, he panicked, took that money, and tried to catch up the payments. It wasn't enough. Just delayed things by a month or 2. And then the money was gone and they were still losing the house. And he needed someone else to be the bad guy. So he made up the story about it being stolen. Convinced himself I must have taken it because the alternative was admitting he'd failed. Easier to make me the villain than look in the mirror and see who was really responsible. Mom claimed she hadn't known. Said she believed him when he accused me. Trusted his word over mine because she was desperate to believe it wasn't their fault. But sitting there in that coffee shop, I couldn't tell if that was true or just something she needed to believe now. The whole confession spilled out in fragments. Dad's voice got quieter with each sentence, like he was running out of air. He said he was sorry, that he'd been wrong, that he'd made a mistake he couldn't take back. And I just sat there, watching this man who'd raised me crumble into someone I barely recognized. Part of me wanted to scream at him, list every way he'd messed up my life. But mostly I just felt tired. Tired of being angry, tired of carrying this weight around. Mom asked what was going to happen with the house. Her voice was small, hopeful in a way that broke something inside me. Like maybe I'd come back to fix everything, play the hero, make it all okay again. I told them the truth. Said the house was mine now, legally and completely. Closing was in 2 weeks. They had 30 days after that to find somewhere else to live. My voice came out flat, emotionless, like I was reading from a script. Dad finally looked at me then. Really looked at me. And I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger or disappointment, but recognition. Like he was seeing me as a person for the first time, not just a screw-up kid who needed fixing. Mom started to say something else, maybe to bargain or plead, but I stood up before she could finish. Told them I'd send the official paperwork through the proper channels. Everything would be legal and documented. No drama, no exceptions. I walked out of that coffee shop and didn't look back. Got in my truck and drove straight to Cleveland without stopping. Didn't cry, Didn't call anyone, didn't process any of it. Just drove and let the highway noise fill my head. 2 weeks later, the closing went through without issues. The house was officially mine. And my parents, true to form, didn't say another word. They packed up and moved out before the 30 days were even up. No goodbye, no forwarding address, nothing. Just gone, like they'd never been there at all. So that's my story. Still processing all of it honestly. Some days I wonder if I did the right thing. Other days I'm certain I did. Life's complicated like that. What do you think? Did I go too far, or was this just karma coming full circle? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, if you made it this far, thanks for listening to my mess of a life story. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me keep sharing these stories. Drop a comment and let me know if you've ever dealt with something similar. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next one.